This presentation is merely a brief overview of the topics covered in the chapter and should not be considered a substitute for reading the chapter. This chapter covers the time value of money, calculations of the time value of money, calculations of cash flows, pro forma financial statements, and evaluation of risk. Liquidity is valuable, and the liquidity of an asset affects its value. All things being equal, the more liquid an asset is, the better. This relationship, how the passage of time affects the liquidity of money and thus its value, is commonly referred to as the time value of money. In general, transforming not so liquid wealth into liquid wealth creates transaction costs, opportunity costs, and risk, all of which take away from the value of wealth. Liquidity has value because it can be used without any additional costs. One dimension of difference between not so liquid wealth and liquidity is time. Cash flows in the past are sunk. Cash flows in the present are liquid. And cash flows in the future are not yet liquid. You can only make choices with liquid wealth, not with cash that you don't have yet or that has already been spent. Separated from your liquidity and your choices by time, there is an opportunity cost. If you had liquidity now, you could use it for consumption or investment and benefit from it now. There is also risk, as there is always some uncertainty about the future, whether or not you will actually get your cash flows and just how much they'll be worth when you do. The further in the future cash flows are, the farther away you are from your liquidity. The more opportunity cost and risk you have, and the more that takes away from the present value of your wealth, which is not yet liquid. In other words, time puts distance between you and your liquidity, and that creates costs that take away from value. The more time there is, the larger its effect on the value of wealth. Calculating present value or future value is fairly simple. To calculate the future value of an investment, you need to know the present value, the rate of interest, and the time of the investment. To calculate the present value of money you will receive in the future, you need to know the future value, the time, and an estimate of the discount rate, which is the opportunity cost of not having liquidity. Value of $2,000 5 years from now, assuming a 10% interest rate. Don't be intimidated by the calculations, as they are all fairly easy, assuming that you go through them step by step. After only a few steps, we can see that $2,000 5 years later, assuming a 10% interest rate, is $3,221.02. Let's take a look at a present value example. What is the present value of $10,000 you will get 4 years from now, assuming comparable investments earn 5% interest? That $10,000 4 years from now is worth $8,227.03 today. While it is easy enough to manually calculate future values and present values, there are a number of online calculators that will make it faster and easier. Here we see such a calculator at calculatorsoup.com, a website with a number of free calculators. After inputting the rate per period, number of periods, and the present value, we merely click the Calculate button and see the future value. The future value shows as a negative, but could be turned into a positive if the present value is input as a negative. In this chapter, we also learn about annuities, which are financial products that have regular payments of the same amount at regular intervals. Here are some examples of annuities that you might encounter. While it is possible to calculate annuities manually, the work is much easier using an online calculator. Pro forma financial statements are projections of the future and show the consequences of the choices we make. Essentially, they allow us to do a little what-if analysis, which helps us to make better choices. We all understand risk, but in certain situations it may be possible to quantify risk. This example is of a coin toss. The probability of the coin coming up heads is 50%, and the probability of it coming up tails is 50%. We can very accurately assess risk in situations like this where we know for sure the exact probabilities. In real life, we often have to rely on estimates, so our risk analysis is less accurate. That concludes this presentation. I hope you enjoy reading the chapter.